The MCU was once a place of heroes and good stories, where characters had meaningful development, the villains were something more than one-dimensional stereotypes, and the plot followed a consistent and logical path. But now, look at the MCU and how far we have fallen. Character development is now done through exposition rather than action. How far we have fallen. The heroic nature of a hero is now determined by superficial qualities rather than their inherent inspirational virtues. How far we have fallen. Cameos that were once a meaningful addition and a nice thing to see are now overused and a redundant crutch for bad writing. How far we have fallen. This series is one of the dumbest things I have ever watched. She-Hulk is Bad, Episode 3. We open with Jen heading over to the prison to see Blonsky. She confronts him about appearing in the video as Abomination for the underground fighting ring. She says that this destroys his chance of being let out early, but Blonsky says that he didn't have a choice and he was forced to go there, and he had voluntarily chosen to return to his cell, which in his opinion makes him look even better and someone who actually has been rehabilitated. She asks who could have possibly broken him out of his cell and forced him to go, and he says it was some sorcerer named Wong. Now, this situation is incredibly dumb and makes Wong into a villain, and we'll talk about this a little bit later.
Are we the baddies?
On her way home, Jen calls up her secretary and tells her to track down Wong. In a previous video, I talked about Jen breaking the fourth wall, and I said that so far, the show has been doing a good job with it, although I was concerned that they were going to start relying on it too much, in which case it was going to be overused and annoying. And guess what? It's now overused and annoying. While Jen is driving her car, she turns to look directly into the camera. She even takes her hands off the wheel and just kind of leans back in the seat. Meanwhile, the car is still moving forward at full speed on the highway as if nothing had happened. She then explains that this isn't going to be some sort of cameo show with new characters every week, but then she says, well, except for Bruce, and then Blonsky, and now Wong. And then she comes to the realization that yes, this is going to be a cameo show, but then she states that everyone should remember whose show this really is. And yeah, everyone knows whose show this really is. It's a bunch of man-hating feminist weirdos, that's who.
Will be. When it fits a woman.
But getting back to the topic of cameos, this is a much bigger issue than what's happening in this show alone. Spider-Man No Way Home is by far the most successful thing in all of Marvel Phase 4. Nothing else comes even remotely close to the success that movie had. There were a bunch of reasons why that movie was so successful. Primarily was because the movie was focused on being fun and entertaining without the woke lecturing like the rest of the MCU. And the movie was like that because for Spider-Man, the company in charge is Sony and not Disney. Unfortunately, Disney didn't understand what actually made that movie successful. Instead, they believed it was because of all the cameos, which, yes, certainly helped the movie, but it wasn't the main reason. And because of this misunderstanding, Disney immediately sent Doctor Strange 2 back into reshoots with the purpose of adding as many cameos as they possibly could. And of course, it didn't work. Those cameos in Doctor Strange 2 were worthless, and the movie failed for the same reason of the rest of the MCU fails, because Disney prioritizes pushing their agenda instead of a good story. However, rather than recognizing the problem, Disney has continued to overuse cameos on all their recent content in lieu of good storytelling. Instead of drawing it down, they've actually increased it. And this has led to a lot of criticism, like what I'm doing right now. As terribly untalented as the writers on this show happen to be, they were at least aware enough of the situation to realize it was going to be brought up with She-Hulk, so they chose to turn it into some sort of meta-commentary by using it as a joke in this scene where Jen breaks the fourth wall. They believe that by doing this, it will entirely counteract the detriment of overly relying on cameos. Of course, they're wrong. Just because the writers point out that they're using a dumb strategy used by no-talent hacks by making a joke about it, it doesn't change the fact that it's still a dumb strategy used by no-talent hacks.
And the truth shall set you free!
But don't worry, it gets worse. The next scene is one of the most obnoxious things ever included in the MCU, and that's saying a lot. The show displays a bunch of different news broadcasts that eventually lead to social media posts where everyone is talking about She-Hulk, and there's a guy talking about how the Hulk power was in a man and now they're giving it to a woman. And then in the comment section below, it's full of things like, why are they turning all the characters into womans? And then we have another guy who says, quote, I don't have a problem with female heroes. I'm just saying, make your own.
Who wrote this dialogue? A toddler?
The lack of self-awareness by the show creators here is breathtaking, because a lot of the stuff that's actually being said in a very satirical way during the show are completely legitimate criticisms that are being levied against Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And they're completely legitimate criticisms, again, because it's actually happening, and the reason why it's happening is because they're trying to push this woke agenda nonsense, because they do want to, in fact, get rid of as many male characters as they can, particularly straight white ones, and they want to get rid of them as much as they possibly can in favor of more diverse characters.
Well, I definitely am not white.
Once more, it is entirely legitimate criticism to point out that what they're doing is both dumb and wrong, but they are trying to depict these men in the show, and by extension, anyone who criticizes the MCU as being sexist towards the woman. And make no mistake, they are attacking you the viewer, the show creators, Disney, these writers, they are attacking you. They are insulting you.
You're so gross.
You have to like it or you're sexist.
But don't worry, it gets worse, because now we're about to get an incredible example of how truly awful the CGI in this show actually is. As Jen is walking into her office, none of this looks even remotely close to realistic. The character is moving in a very strange way, like they couldn't quite get the motion capture right. The character just looks like she's superimposed onto the scene, like it's almost a piece of paper that's been kind of just left on top of it. It doesn't look real in any shape, form, or fashion. It is absolutely awful. And remember, this is a show that cost millions upon millions of dollars to make, and this is the best that they could do. Jen is called into her boss's office, where she's told that she might be needed on another case in order to work with a lawyer. This is the guy from the first episode. He's a one-dimensional stereotype character that serves as nothing more than to be a toxic male figure for the audience to hate.
This is how insecure heterosexual males used to bond.
To call him a character is a bit of a stretch. He's more of a caricature that was created from the delusional, worm-addled brain of the man-hating feminist writers.
That is an incredibly outmoded and sexist attitude.
Regardless, he wants to sue somebody, and Jen's boss wants to assign her, but she says she's too busy with the Emil Blonsky case, so she can't do it. We then get a very brief introduction of another character named Mallory Book, who seems to be, shall we say, slightly different in appearance from what she looked like in the comics. Because, yes, this is yet another character who has been racistly blackwashed, which means we get to put another stamp on the card. Also, I want to point out that in this series, this is the second red-haired character that has been the victim of racist blackwashing, the first one being Titania, this idiot from the first episode. And while this sort of race swapping is unfortunately becoming more common, for some strange reason, it seems to happen to red-headed characters at a much higher rate than anything else. Sure, I understand the fact that the people working at Disney and Marvel are racist morons, but why is it that they have such an incredible hatred of red-haired characters? It's really bizarre, and I don't quite understand why red hair specifically is something that Hollywood in general seems to hate. Here's a small example of just some of them. There's also about 24 more of these characters that are supposed to be a redheaded white person, but whenever they appear in some new movie, TV show, or whatever, that character is the victim of racist blackwashing. It's even more strange when you consider that Hollywood doesn't actually hate the color because they're more than willing to appease and pander to, the Reds.
I am a proud member of the Communist Party.
Suddenly, Wong shows up and gives a brief explanation on what happened with Blonsky. He says that he did in fact force Blonsky to go to the underground fight because Wong needed a suitable opponent to prove himself as the new Sorcerer Supreme. And then Jen asks him to show up in court in order to explain this and to help Blonsky, and Wong agrees. Then we get a scene of the toxic guy who's talking to one of the other lawyers at the firm, and he explains that he gave about $175,000 to a shape-shifting elf that looked like some absurd female rap artist that no one cares about. The lawyer then says he'll get started on the lawsuit right away, and the toxic guy leaves. Moments later, that same toxic guy goes back into the office and claims that he has had a change of heart and that he wants to drop the case. And it took me about 0.2 seconds to instantly realize that it wasn't actually the toxic guy and instead it was the shape-shifting elf. And then this is revealed about a minute later, and yes, it's about as dumb as you would expect.
I barely have a reason to care, and even I noticed.
The next day, there's a hearing at the prison to see if Blonsky should be released, and there's a very, very bad attempt at comedy when they introduce Blonsky's pen pals, and it's a group of different women who are all dressed up with some sort of hippie stuff and flower crowns, and Blonsky says that he's going to open up a meditation studio and that all 8 of these women are his soulmates, and everybody, please laugh! Please pretend that it's not all entirely cringe and dumb.
I think I just threw up in my mouth.
Jen calls several witnesses to come forward, and they all talk about how Blonsky has changed and how he's helped them, but Wong, for some reason, hasn't shown up to talk about the escape, which is the most important thing that they want to discuss at the hearing. This is a very overused trope where the star witness doesn't show up until the very last few seconds, and all of this is meant to increase the drama and create artificial tension that everyone can see through because it's really stupid. And, of course, right at the last moment, Wong shows up through a portal. Wong is able to explain what happened and admits that he did in fact force Blonsky to go along with it, and the board seems to accept this, but they're concerned that when Blonsky turns into the Abomination again, he's going to lose control. So Blonsky says that he can put everyone's mind at ease and begins taking off his shoes, and it is painfully obvious for everyone in that room and in the audience to see that he is going to demonstrate his ability to change into the Abomination and still remain in control. Could he have explained this a little bit better? Sure, but it was still very obvious what he was going to do. And then he does, in fact, change into the Abomination, and he just casually stands there and states that, yes, he's in full control of his power, but for some idiotic reason, every single person in the room starts screeching and panicking in response to something that is not even remotely called for.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
There's also a flood of guards that burst into the room and everyone continues panicking, but again, Blonsky made it clear that he was going to demonstrate his ability to control himself, and yet everyone is acting as if he's going to go wild and he's going to try to escape. It doesn't make any sense. Blonsky returns to his normal form and everyone settles down. And then the board starts talking to Wong. They say, we're grateful that you came in and talked to us about this, but you kind of also admitted that you broke him out of prison, which is against the law. At which point, Wong doesn't even bother to try to argue with him. He's just like, no, I'm not dealing with this. He opens a portal and walks away.
Is that legal?
On the one hand, I kind of like this, because it goes directly against an incredibly irritating trope that I often see in some of the books that I read, where you have this unbelievably powerful person, whether it's through skill or magic or something else, and the main character, and they're just incredibly powerful, they can fly or they have super strength, and then they're getting belittled and talked down to and even disciplined by some idiot loudmouth female store clerk or something like that. And then the main character is just kind of like, yeah, shrugging and going along with it and whatnot. It's like, no, just tell her to fuck off or, throw her into orbit or something. You don't have to listen to these idiots. They don't have any authority over you. And that's kind of like what Wong does here, except Wong doesn't really do that in an authoritative way. Instead, he's just like, all right, well, I gotta go, and then he leaves through a portal. So it's a little bit more for comedy effect as opposed to him telling them to go fuck off, but hey, it still goes against that stupid trope, so I kind of like that. Putting that aside for the moment, when we look at the situation between Wong and Emil, Wong absolutely is a villain. He is the bad guy. He forced someone to fight against their will. He went into the prison, he took Emil out, and then he forced him to participate in the fighting ring, all because Wong wanted to show off as the new Sorcerer Supreme.
Are you not entertained?
How does that do anything other than to make Wong into a villain? He would have had to go there, and he said that he forced Blonsky to go and participate, and Blonsky agreed that he was in fact forced to go and participate. So what exactly did Wong do? Did he threaten to hurt Blonsky when he was in his normal form, when he was just trapped in the prison? Did he threaten to cause trouble for him? Did he threaten the other people that he cared about, those women, his pen pals? What did Wong do that would actually force Blonsky to go and participate? Because even if he just portaled him away and brought him to the underground arena, Blonsky could have just stood there, or he could have sat down and refused to participate. But he was forced to fight. So how can we look at Wong and consider him to be anything other than a bad guy, a villain? Because he would have had to threaten the people that Blonsky cares about. That's not something that a hero does. That's not something that good people do. And this is a major problem with Disney, Marvel, and just in general, is they don't understand what heroes are supposed to be. And doing this sort of thing is not a heroic thing. It's not something the good guys do.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
Outside the building, Jen is confronted by a bunch of stupid reporters asking stupid questions, so in other words, it's just like real life. Although one of those questions is that there's a rumor that Jen got her powers from a mafia hit gone wrong, which is exactly what happened in the comics, but the brain-dead woke feminist writers on this show decided to remove that because they wanted to make sure that Jen was seen as a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, and Bruce didn't have to save her.
She was such a strong female woman.
Sometime later, Jen goes to a bar with her coworkers. The lawyer guy is complaining about the toxic man that Jen used to work with and says that he's an idiot and the case is incredibly difficult, whereupon Jen and her secretary agree that yes, he is an idiot, and then they give some examples. This is going to be his strategy for winning the case. Essentially, the toxic guy's old coworkers are all going to give statements that he's a complete moron, and therefore he actually did believe that the shape-shifting elf was in fact the real rap star, Megan Horse Lady, whatever, something or other. After this is presented, the judge agrees and says yes, the toxic guy is an idiot, and because he is so incredibly stupid, that's why he wins the case.
Great job, Morty. A feminist masterpiece.
After the verdict, there's a quick cameo of the actual rap star Horse Lady for about 5 seconds, because that's how worthless these stupid cameos have become.
You can smell the shit from 5 miles away.
When they're leaving the courthouse, the toxic guy says that he wishes the elf lady would get some sort of punishment to restrict her powers so that she couldn't do this sort of thing again, and this gives Jen an idea. She speaks to the parole board and gives them the idea to release Blonsky over the condition that he would never transform into the Abomination again, and that he wears a power-inhibiting device for the rest of his life. Something that you might not know is that when Disney originally wanted to create this show, the first idea was to have it be a more procedurally based lawyer courtroom type thing, but the writers admitted that they have absolutely no idea how the law works or how to write that kind of a show, which seems to also extend into any other kind of show as well. I bring this up because this scene is a great example of that, because while there can be conditions for Blonsky to be paroled, requiring him to wear a device for the rest of his life is not even remotely something that would be considered legal, and is in fact grossly unconstitutional. Of course, the writers don't know this because they're idiots. Later that night, Jen is walking home when she gets attacked by a group of unbelievably stupid guys who apparently took some magic tools from an Asgardian and they're using them as weapons. At first, Jen is scared, but then she remembers that she can turn into Shrek, and of course she easily beats all of them. However, from what we can see, it's pretty obvious that she actually killed 1 or 2 of them. Let's take a closer look. She smashes these 2 guys' heads together with enough force to send the other guy flying into the wall. That means that she took this guy by the head and impacted his skull into the other man's skull with enough force to send him flying about 5 or 6 feet up into the wall, which means that both of these men have at minimum severe concussions. More likely, they're both dead.
The body count keeps rising, and it's harder and harder to justify it.
She follows that up by launching a guy about 15 feet into the air, whereupon he falls like this.
He's dead.
The resulting injury from that would destroy his neck and his spine, resulting in either instant death or permanent paralysis. But of course, all the characters just get up and walk away like nothing happened, and that's where the episode seems to end, but then we are graced with something that is truly and masterfully indicative of just how far the MCU has fallen when we get a post-credit scene with the rap star horse lady and Shrek twerking.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't.
And with that, I don't think there's a whole lot more that I need to say. Thankfully, that's the end of episode 3.
Taking shots at the enemy. I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new